All right. So, Elena, I am so happy to be speaking with you today, and your family owned restaurant there at Zenon Taverna. And so I wanted to know a little bit about you. I know, Elena, you and your husband, you run the restaurant. And so tell me a little bit about your position there and what you do and how long you've been there, and also the history behind it. I know
Sure.
it's long standing, so tell me a little
Yep.
bit.
So this year marked the restaurant's 33rd year that my family has had it. We're located in Astoria, New York. Home of the Greeks is what they used to call Astoria. And my father came to the States in '85. So my father is a trained chef from Cyprus. He graduated from the Culinary Institute in Cyprus. And for those who don't know about Cyprus, Cyprus is an island nation in the Mediterranean. It is located just south of Turkey and just north of Egypt. Geographically, it is considered part of Asia. Politically, it is part of Europe, but part of the European Union. And so our location is a kind of what influences so much about our cuisine, since we're going to talk about our cuisine today and the restaurant. And so when my father came to New York in '85, he came so he can start a family. He got married in Cyprus and came over and brought my mom over. And he was a trained chef, so he started working in different Greek restaurants and realized that there wasn't really a Cypriot place for people to go and eat. And he's like, I miss the food from home, right? So why would I want to cook the food from home? So in 1988, he was working at the restaurant. The restaurant was more of a social club when he started working here as a chef. So it was closed doors, like more members only. And in, I believe in the mid to late 80s is when it became more of a restaurant. And in 1988, he took it over and opened it as a traditional Cypriot taverna.
Got it.
So started, offering the home cooked cuisine that we had in Cyprus for everyone here. And, the population of Greeks and Cypriots in Astoria in the 80s and 90s was huge. I mean, there were so many people here that would come here because we have churches here, we have communities, we have groups. And so people would go where there were others from their home country so they can feel comfortable. So the restaurant was created and opened in true taverna style, right? Homemade cooking, the kind that you would find in mom and dad's kitchen at home. Made to order, those are our daily specials. Made to order items like souvlaki, which are kebabs, sheftalias, which are traditional Cypriot, cross between the meatball and the sausage, and halloumi, lunzao, sausage, all these things we, as much as we can, we make ourselves here.
Yeah.
And so then we've had the restaurant for 33 years. I grew up in the restaurant. I was managing the restaurant for about 10 years or so before we started our family. And then my husband moved into the restaurant and I stepped out a little bit. I'm still helping on the side with marketing and, these calls and interviews.
Right, for sure.
Social media, all that fun stuff. But my husband and my parents are both the main keepers, and my parents are in the kitchen and my husband is running the floor and doing the managing.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's very much tied to, it sounds like the tradition and the family, the whole aura of family and tradition that you stand by as part of the Cypriot culture. And so you're true to that. Your whole family's involved. It's a family, I mean, your husband, your father, your mother, that's really amazing. And so 33 years, tell me a little bit when your dad or your father was over in Cyprus, what was it about? Was there anything particular about the cuisine that he really missed? Was it the family recipes? Was it just the social aspect? Was it, what was kind of the passion that really stirred it up that he and your family said that, well, food and the drink of Cyprus and how it's represented over there that he wanted to really bring here, to Astoria? Like, what did he,
I think it's a little bit of everything you just said. So the social aspect is a really big part of it, right? So in '88, I was a baby. I was 2 years old. So I can't tell you how it actually was then, but there are people that come now and they're like, I remember when you were running around in a diaper and, and we would sit with your dad and hang out and, I miss those days. And it made me feel like I was home. I was a student here in the States and I miss my mom and dad, and they gave that to me. The social aspect is a huge part of it, right? Because eating with people is a social activity. And so the social aspect is a really big part of it, and just providing that family feel to people, right? Because culturally we're we're very family oriented. So my friends are considered my kids' aunts and uncles. They're not, John and Maria to my kids.
Right.
Yeah, and Thea.
Yeah.
And so there's just that aspect is kind of ingrained in it. And then there's also the part of wanting that dish, like, for example, pasticcio, right? Pasticcio is a very traditional Greek and Cypriot dish. Depending on where you're from in Greece and in Cyprus, you will make pasticcio differently. It's impossible to find two people that will make pasticcio exactly the same, right? But to make pasticcio, you're looking at like an hour and a half of slaving over the oven and making and mixing and assembling. And not many people make it, but it's not like an everyday thing. And especially like a college student isn't going to sit and make a tray of pasticcio for themselves, right? And so being able to offer some of these dishes that people it wasn't as readily available, and to come from like a genuine mom and pop place, right? It was the food with the feel and just everything about it.
Right.
He just felt like it was missing, it was lacking. And there was another Cypriot restaurant. It was just a little different than ours, than ours was. And there was a lot of Greek restaurants, but the cuisine is not exactly the same. And there's a lot of dishes that we make differently from the Greek cuisine that are very specific to Cyprus.
Right.
So that's what my dad wanted to bring here. And I mean, we're still here. So
right. Absolutely.
Good move.
And isn't that true that, so it's like, it's the hardest recipes, the dishes that take the most time, that you pour love into. It sounds like that is the core of it. I mean, that sounds like it's the center of how the food is the center of the culture, the love, the time, the energy, the kids running around, the whole thing. It sounds like that's what represents what he wanted to bring. So I totally follow that, and that's really, really beautiful. And so do you feel that, I mean, it sounds like that's also how it's kind of the center of society when it comes to the food and the culture in Cyprus. What part of Cyprus was it that that kind of influenced your menu choices? Is it more regional? Are there certain cities? Is there certain dishes that are more popular, say, in little villages versus, the bigger cities? Tell me a little bit about that, kind of what makes up your menu.
So I would say, in general, it would be, Cyprus is not very big.
Yeah.
Right? So we have a lot of villages.
Yeah.
I would say most of our dishes are dishes you will find throughout Cyprus. But like, as I mentioned earlier, there will always be someone that makes it a little different, right?
Yeah.
So one person may put extra mint in their pasticcio and the other person doesn't put as much mint. One person might decide to make it with a ground lamb, where, the traditional and the mainstream in Cyprus would be with pork. So I would say most of the dishes are just generally found everywhere. So something like sheftaya. Sheftaya and halloumi are the two items that Cyprus would be known for, right? Those are two very specific items to Cyprus. So halloumi is a Cypriot goat and sheep's cheese. We do not make that because we cannot get fresh goat's milk like that here. We have tried. It is not very easy in New York City to get goat's milk like that. And the sheftaya, which is a Cypriot pork char grilled meatball. And so, something that I would say is genuine to our restaurant that you actually may not find in Cyprus is, after being here for so many years, we actually took some of these traditional recipes that were done with pork and we made changes. So we also, on our menu, sheftaya is traditionally pork. In Cyprus, pork is the main meat that's made. That's used for most dishes. Because on a small island, what's the easiest thing to grow, right? Pigs are easier to grow than cows. Beef is rarely used in dishes. People cook with it, but it's not a main staple. And lamb is reserved for traditional dishes like our spring lamb kleftiko, which we typically offer on Thursdays and Sundays. And that goes in the oven and cooks for 4 hours, right?
Goodness.
Lamb is not a dish. Lamb is not a dish you just throw together and it's ready to go in 20 minutes. Like, our lamb dishes are reserved for like a Sunday when the family is all there. And if we were in Cyprus, we'd have a clay oven in the back and we'd do it over charcoals for 6 hours, you know?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Right.
But for example, the chef Taya, my dad, I can't tell you when because it was a long time ago, decided one time to try and make it with chicken instead of pork. And it really took off. And it's also really good. That's not something you will find anywhere else. So that's 100% specific to us. Another example is the stuffed grape leaves. So stuffed grape leaves are kind of universal in Southern Europe and the Middle East. Everyone makes them very different depending on where you're from. But in Cyprus, they're typically made with pork, rice, lemon, crushed mint, salt, pepper, onion. Those are the traditional parsley. Those are the traditional Cypriot kubepia. We call them kubepia. But one time my dad decided to just make them with chicken. And we put them on the menu and also took off, you know, and made slightly different than the pork, but yet, you know, it's kind of like our own take on it. And so we've done a few items like this where we took something very traditional and, you know, switched it up a little bit. But in general, I would say the cuisine is just something you'll find throughout the country. And, you know, if you actually go to Cyprus, and my husband is from Greece, he's not from Cyprus. And so the first time we went to Cyprus and we were going out to restaurants because every aunt and uncle wants to bring us out. We were having 2 dinners a night. I mean, you know, because we weren't there for very long. So everyone was trying to get their time in. And we started going to the restaurants eating and he was like, wow, everything really is like the restaurant. And I was like, yeah, like it really is. We really tried to keep it as traditional as possible. So.
Right. Yeah, no, that's amazing. And it sounds like, I mean, it's that slow food that, you know, again, it's centered around the time and the energy that you put into it. So that's really, really beautiful to hear, that you represent that in your menu. And so it's authentic. It's straight from how, you know what I mean? It's a direct tie to how everything would be represented, in Cyprus for people who are interested in how things are, you know? And so what do you think, in terms of the, you know, you have a beautiful restaurant from what I've seen in the pictures, but it goes beyond, it seems like it goes beyond food. So like your restaurant is a traditional taverna, like it looks like one. How do you feel that that's kind of characterized in terms of the presentation? I mean, how far does the presentation go between how things are presented, and just, you know, culturally in terms of how the look and the feel and the other kind of senses that people can experience in your restaurant to Cyprus?
Right. So the restaurant, the ambiance we're going for is traditional Cypriot. As you can see behind me, there are murals on the wall. These were painted by a local Cypriot artist back in '86. And we preserved them, brought him in, had him touch them up. And what they depict is different scenes from Cyprus. Now, Cyprus in 1986 and Cyprus in 2020 is very different, but it's still meant to capture what the island is about, what the country is about. Here is like one of the relics, one of the statues on the island. There is a monastery, a castle. We have archaeological digs in Cyprus. We have paintings of that. We have paintings of the different ports, which now look extremely different, but traditional ports. Just some scenery from the island. You know, the wood trim that you see behind me as well. This is what you're going to get in Cyprus. You know, you're going to get wood beams along our shelves that you can't see on the camera, but along our shelves we actually have traditional items from Cyprus that my father has brought over with him every time he's on. We serve our wine carafes in actual handmade jugs that we get specifically from one person in Cyprus. We pre-order them and either have them shipped over here in a container, or my dad will bring them, or my mom will bring them when they come. You know, we have traditional like weave decorations. Like we're trying as much as possible to have the character of being there, you know, to try and transport you to Cyprus or to, you know, the Mediterranean, when we can't really do that in the middle of New York City any other way, but to have these traditional images around us and just kind of remind us of what what Cyprus is about and just the feel that we have there.
Yeah, no, that's amazing that you all are, you know, in terms of the authenticity and how genuine it is beyond just the food, but just walking in your doors, you feel like you've been transported, that you've been able to achieve that, and that, you know, you represent that for your customers, and it sounds like you know, that family kind of culture extends to them. So I'm sure everyone feels that warmth and that energy, you know, when they're walking through. So tell me a little about going to travel. Have you where and when have you been over, you or your family have the last time kind of been over to Cyprus, and over there, what are some kind of favorite things to do? What kind of spirit or way of life do you feel that, you know, when you've been or you've come back, that you carry through kind of a renewed spirit? Is there a renewed spirit in particular also?
So we were supposed to go this year.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, given the current state of the world, we had to cancel our trip. It was actually the first time in maybe 15 years that my whole family was going to be there.
Mm.
We were going for a family wedding because it's typically, you know, our excuse to be able to leave. When you have a restaurant, it's actually really difficult to get away.
Right.
So I would say the last time I've been there, I was there was probably 2 years ago.
Okay.
My parents try and go about once a year when my grandparents were alive, just to be able to see them. It's a very far trip. So, you know, it's 13 to 15 hours depending on your layover, and there's no direct flights from New York. So there will always be a stopover. You're losing 2 days going, 2 days coming. Where do we go and what should people see? So the one thing that I think is really like food and wine related, I think it's extremely important for people to study up on Cyprus a little bit before going, just to understand the culture and how the culture is ingrained in the food and wine. So Cyprus has these amazing wine trails that they've been developing over the years. When we've gone, because we try and serve only Greek and Cypriot wines. We have a few non-Greek and Cypriot wines, but our main staple are Greek and Cypriot wines. So when we travel over there, we try and visit the vineyards and meet the winemakers and just check out things there. So I think that's one really big thing that people need to do. And a second I would say is to understand a little bit about the food and make sure you go and you try the traditional tavernas. You know, Cyprus is very big on tourism. So there will always be places, like there's Pizza Huts and, you know, a bunch of, there's, you know, we go to Cyprus and people are like, let's bring you to Pizza Hut. And like, I don't want to go to Pizza Hut in Cyprus. Bring me somewhere, feed me fish, feed me the fish that was caught this morning, you know?
Right.
So eating traditional seafood dishes, the Mezze is like a very big part of Cypriot cuisine. And so what Mezze is, it's similar to tapas or small dishes. Mm-hmm. And you pretty much go to a restaurant and tell them, give me Mezze, and you don't know what they're bringing you. They're bringing you whatever they want, whatever they made that day. And so that's like a huge part of our culture. And, you know, we offer it on our menu. During regular business hours, we offer on the menu. And we have seafood, we have meat, or we have vegetarian, and you can't go wrong with any of them. The most traditional one would be the meat mezze, right? Because it has the shatalia and the halloumi and the smoked pork loin. But if we were in Cyprus and it was seafood, it would literally be the catch of the day. It would be the fisherman brought this to me today, and this is what I have. What do you want? Right. Which is absolutely amazing. So like you want to go there, and then to see actual Cyprus, I would say. There's so many archaeological digs that people don't necessarily know about Cyprus, right? So there's so much history in Cyprus, and because of its geographical location, if you look up the history of Cyprus, it was handed from one emperor to a queen to a king, you know, like passed through so many hands. So many cultures have passed through the island that it's really defined. It's affected so much of the island and has kind of defined what's there. So you can see so many different things. I mean, I didn't know, and I've done studies on Cyprus. I didn't know that there are sarcophaguses in Cyprus, you know. Oh, wow. And like which I saw at the Met here in New York because they have an exhibit on Cyprus, but I didn't see in Cyprus, you know, which blows my mind. So there's different archaeological digs. For people who are looking for more modern things, you know, there's multi-million-dollar marina that was just built in Limassol. I think they're working on one in Agia Napa and Larnaca. It's such a beautiful island, and the beaches. I mean, the beaches are you can't really compare to the beaches. You know, you can go as deep as you want and you can still see your feet, and it's
amazing.
You can see the starfish on the bottom. You can see the fish. It's, you know,
Yeah.
it's an amazing place to be. And there's also mountains, you know, like there was a video I saw about Cyprus that was like, you can go from the beach to the mountains to like snow-capped mountains, which I haven't seen yet in Cyprus because I'm not going to Cyprus for snow.
Yeah.
But in like an hour and a half, which is totally crazy, but amazing at the same time. So
yeah,
there's definitely a lot to see and a lot to do there.
Yeah, that sounds like there's, I mean, it's rich in history and culture and natural beauty and food and drink and I mean, I'm sure the soil, just because it's the Mediterranean, you know, and it's there, it's in the middle of the sea, you know, so I'm sure that has a lot, you know, of character that it adds to that. So that really sounds amazing, and it sounds very, very diverse. And so it's amazing how much of that, as you were speaking about it, that I see reflected in your taverna, like right there in Astoria, that you know, people could just walk through your doors and experience all that, and your family and the warmth in your family and your traditions and your recipes that your father brought over. And so that, you know, it's almost like it lives on. It's eternal. It's there. They can come and experience it anytime they want. So that's really, really amazing. And I'm so happy that you shared that with us. And I really want to encourage everyone, you know, out there near you to come in and experience it for themselves. And so thank you so much, Elena, for telling us about you and your family and Zenon Taverna. And I hope everyone can come and see you guys soon.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Of course.